This is a rare Ethiopian Orthodox Bible manuscript, handwritten in Ethiopia's sacred liturgical language, a piece of Ethiopia's Christian heritage preserved in the very language the church has guarded for centuries.
For more than 1,700 years, a warning linked to Jesus has been locked away in the highlands of Ethiopia, protected by a community that refused to let the outside world rewrite their faith.
The Ethiopian Bible is the oldest Bible, which is full in terms of a Genesis to Revelation copy, is 14th century.
Hidden manuscripts stored in stone chambers describe teachings never allowed into the official record. These texts were copied by hand, guarded through wars, and kept from foreign eyes. What they reveal is not a harmless variation. It is a message that challenges the story the world was taught to believe. The unexpected custodian. The story of how the Bible moved across the world is often told in a soft and harmless way. People hear a calm picture of a sacred text that traveled from Rome into Europe and only afterward reached the edges of Africa. Many trust this version because it feels safe. It makes the past look clean. It hides anything that sounds frightening. Yet the real story is nothing like that. The truth is far darker. It is filled with hidden struggles, secret survival, and a long chain of events that most people never learn. Long before Europe declared itself the center of Christian authority, there was another world that already had deep Christian roots. And in that world, Ethiopia stood firm as one of the earliest and most devoted homes of Christianity. By the 4th century, something shocking had already formed inside the kingdom of Aksum. Under the rule of King Ezana, Christianity was not a small idea that survived in the shadows. It was the official faith of a large and fearfully powerful empire. This empire spread across a wide part of East Africa. It reached into regions that controlled dangerous and busy trade routes. These routes linked the Mediterranean, Arabia, and India. This brought great wealth, but it also brought threats, enemies, and strong foreign forces. Yet, in the middle of this constant danger, Ethiopian Christianity did not collapse. Instead, it grew stronger. It did not bend under pressure. It did not break apart when other regions fell into violent fights over doctrine. While the rest of the Christian world argued about which beliefs were correct, Ethiopia kept its faith pure and steady. It did not twist its beliefs to please any ruler. Behind this strength was a truth that is even more intense. Ethiopia began protecting its own sacred writings at a very early stage. These writings were recorded in the ancient language of Ge'ez. Ge'ez was older than Latin. It did not shift or twist over time. It stayed stable for centuries. This stability gave Ethiopia something incredibly rare. While Europe allowed political councils, state power, and imperial leaders to shape the Bible, Ethiopia did not follow this path. Many books disappeared in Europe simply because rulers did not like them. Ethiopia refused to let politics decide which sacred books survived. The Ethiopian church accepted books such as Enoch and Jubilees. These books were once respected by early Jewish and Christian communities. They were later rejected in Rome. Ethiopia kept them because no foreign empire had the power to force the Ethiopian church to obey. Then a severe and world-changing event took place. Muslim expansion spread across surrounding regions. This expansion cut Ethiopia off from the rest of the Christian world for many centuries. Many would expect such isolation to weaken a faith. But the opposite happened in Ethiopia. Isolation turned Ethiopia into a locked fortress. It became almost impossible for outside rulers to interfere. It became extremely hard for new ideas to enter. This separation acted like a massive wall that protected ancient writings from editings or destruction. Deep inside the Ethiopian mountains, monks became the guardians of these texts. Their discipline was intense and frightening. They learned Ge'ez with great effort. They copied manuscripts by hand for many years. They worked inside stone monasteries that clung to cliffs and hid in narrow valleys. They protected their libraries during fires, invasions, and violent internal conflicts. They guarded them through political shifts that destroyed other regions. Their steady isolation created a slow miracle. Ethiopia became the only place on earth that preserved a complete ancient Christian canon without foreign commands or outside pressure. When Europe finally shaped the canon that many people now call the official Bible, Ethiopia had already sealed its own scriptures. Europe limited its canon to 66 books. Ethiopia kept a far larger set that reached 81. Ethiopia never came under Roman rule. It never came under European control. Its independence allowed it to guard texts that vanished in every other Christian land. Hundreds of years passed before modern researchers entered Ethiopia's highlands and remote monasteries. And when they finally arrived, they discovered that Ethiopia's isolation had created something astonishing. It had created a preserved world of scriptures, churches, and sacred traditions that existed nowhere else. Archaeological shockwaves, the manuscripts, monasteries, and discoveries that rewrite biblical history. Ethiopia's claim to guarding the world's oldest biblical tradition is not only a proud statement from a religious community, it is backed by physical evidence. This evidence is intense and overwhelming. Archaeologists who traveled to Aksum, Lalibela, Yeha, and remote mountain monasteries did not find broken scraps. They found records and structures that changed everything they believed about early Christianity. These discoveries forced them to face a very disturbing idea. Ethiopia did not simply protect its tradition, it kept an entire ancient world alive that other regions allowed to disappear. The discoveries were not small fragments left in ruins. They included full codices. A codex is an early form of a bound book that was created long before printing existed. Researchers found entire sets of the Old Testament. They found complete sets of the New Testament. They found collections that contained books that had vanished everywhere else. Some manuscripts survived in full from the 14th century. Others existed in older pieces. Their condition shocked experts. They expected faded ink and broken pages. Instead, they found pages that survived through centuries of danger. One of the most shocking discoveries was the Garima Gospels. Scholars already knew these manuscripts existed. They simply did not understand their true age. When scientific testing began, experts expected dates linked to medieval Europe. They assumed the manuscripts came from a time when Europe produced its own illuminated Gospels. The results destroyed this assumption. The testing pushed the date of the Garima Gospels back to a time between the 4th and 7th centuries. This meant that these manuscripts were as old as the earliest known European Gospel books. In some cases, they were even older. This discovery rocked the academic world. Many experts believed Europe held the oldest illustrated Christian manuscripts. Ethiopia shattered that belief. The Garima manuscripts carried another disturbing truth. They were fully intact. They were not destroyed by war. They were not burned in religious conflicts. They were never controlled by political leaders who tried to censor their content. Their survival showed that Ethiopia had lived in a parallel Christian world that stood outside the reach of Roman authority. Ethiopia did not only guard manuscripts, it also held ancient rock churches that stunned every archaeologist who entered them. The churches of Lalibela were carved straight out of solid stone. These churches were not copies of European architecture. They were the work of a Christian tradition that grew on its own. Their walls, tunnels, and chambers carried inscriptions that mentioned books rejected by the Western Bible. These inscriptions proved that the Ethiopian canon grew naturally through devotion and long practice. It was not formed by any empire that tried to control belief. Archaeologists uncovered signs that Ethiopian Christians stayed connected with early Jewish communities long before Europe cut ties with these traditions. This connection explained why books such as Enoch and Jubilees survived in Ethiopia. These books had been respected by ancient Jews and early Christians. Europe later rejected them. Ethiopia continued to protect them because no foreign empire had the force to erase them. And as researchers compared the Ethiopian manuscripts with the versions shaped by Roman councils, they saw something unsettling. The differences between them were not simple changes in wording. They came from centuries of political pressure, forced decisions, and violent arguments over who controlled the Christian truth. These comparisons revealed a frightening history that most people have never heard. The Canon War: how Rome cut books, silenced teachings, and Ethiopia refused to comply. When Emperor Constantine the Great legalized Christianity through the Edict of Milan in 313, the Roman Empire walked straight into a dangerous crisis. Hundreds of Christian groups already existed. Each group carried its own beliefs and its own scriptures. These groups did not agree with each other. They argued. They clashed. They claimed their teachings were the true ones. Rome did not know how to control them. If Christianity was supposed to strengthen the empire, it needed one message. The empire could not allow a chaotic collection of voices. It needed a single line of authority. To solve this, Roman leaders gathered bishops into a chain of councils. One of these councils became the most famous for all the wrong reasons. It was the Council of Nicaea in 325. The bishops did not meet in peace. They met in tension. They came from regions scarred by conflict. Some followed the teachings of Arius of Alexandria, who argued that the Son of God was created and not eternal. Others followed Athanasius and the Alexandrian bishops, who insisted that the Son was fully divine, equal with the Father, and sharing the same eternal essence. Still others arrived uncertain, pulled between both sides, fearful of choosing incorrectly in a debate that could decide the future of the empire. The debates were fierce, voices were raised, accusations flew, bishops threw rival writings on tables and demanded judgment. Some even refused to sit near their opponents. The tense debate dragged on for weeks. It was at this stage that Constantine himself stepped in. He did not understand every theological detail, but he understood power. He understood unity. He entered the council hall wearing imperial gold. Constantine urged the bishops to agree. He pressed them to settle their differences. He wanted peace in the empire, not a divided church that tore provinces apart. He pushed them to remain in Nicaea until a decision was reached, even providing guards, scribes, and imperial messengers to speed the discussions. He used every tool of influence he had except open violence. Out of this pressure came the Nicene Creed. It declared that the Son was of one essence with the Father. It rejected Arius. It placed the weight of imperial power behind a single definition of Christ. Many bishops signed it out of fear of the emperor. Others signed in triumph. A handful refused and were exiled. Many writings used by early Christians did not survive in the traditions shaped by these councils. Some were too mystical. Some were tied to Jewish customs Rome disliked. Some gave too much freedom to individual believers. Rome wanted a faith that moved through bishops, synods, and imperial priests. It wanted order. It wanted hierarchy. Books such as Enoch, Jubilees, the Book of the Covenant, and the Didascalia faded from the Western tradition. They were too strange, too bold, too old, too independent. But these books did not vanish everywhere. In Ethiopia, they survived. Ethiopia treasured them. Ethiopia carried them through centuries of translation and commentary. Ethiopia saw them not as threats, but as pieces of a heritage that reached back to the earliest memories of the faith. Rome's influence spread through Europe, shaping councils, liturgies, and doctrines. Its canon became the dominant one in the West. But its reach did not overpower Ethiopia. Ethiopia listened to its own teachers. It guarded traditions that predated Rome's desire for control. It kept texts that held a different rhythm, a different voice, a different soul. Ethiopia did not carve its scripture to fit imperial demands. It did not trade its older knowledge for political convenience. The divide grew even deeper after the Council of Chalcedon in 451. That council split the Christian world in two. Rome went one way. Several Eastern communities went another. Ethiopia joined those who rejected Rome's new formulas. This choice sealed its independence. From that moment, Ethiopia guarded writings that Europe judged dangerous or misguided. Inside this larger treasury of writings were ideas Rome would never accept. These ideas included secret instructions Jesus was believed to have given after the resurrection. These instructions would later become the most feared and controversial part of the Ethiopian canon. The forbidden teachings. What Jesus said in Ethiopia's books that never appeared in the Western Bible. According to the Book of the Covenant and the wider Ethiopian tradition, Jesus stayed with his disciples for 40 days after his resurrection and gave them teachings that cut far deeper than anything found in the Western New Testament. These teachings described hidden spiritual structures behind the physical world. They explained what the soul is made of. They explained the forces that pull at human thought in every moment. They delivered a level of detail that would have been impossible for Roman leaders to control. One message appears again and again in these texts. Jesus demanded inner transformation. He said the real battle did not happen in public ceremonies. It happened right inside the heart. This message threatened the power of institutions. Rome needed worshippers who obeyed the outer structure. These writings encouraged people to question what that structure offered. This may be why Rome rejected them. Some Ethiopian writings contain an even more alarming claim. They describe two creators. One creator is made of pure light. The other is a shadow being driven by pride. The shadow being created a deceptive world that traps people in illusions. In this version of events, Jesus does not only save people from sin, he frees them from a false reality built to confuse humanity. This idea was far too intense for Roman theology. Roman leaders wanted a belief system that was easier to control. They preferred a world with one creator and a simple path to salvation. They did not want a story that revealed a hidden enemy behind the visible universe. The Ethiopian texts also describe angels and demons with overwhelming detail. Jesus explains that every single thought a person has becomes a building block of their spiritual future. Each thought can create a path toward light or a path into darkness. Nothing in the Western canon reaches this level of psychological depth. These teachings present a world where every moment shapes a person's eternal direction. Another difference stands out sharply. The Ethiopian tradition describes Jesus as a healer and teacher in far greater detail than the Roman texts. He is shown guiding people toward purification. He teaches fasting that strengthens the inner life. He explains the importance of nature and silence. He emphasizes balance and peace in the soul. These teachings resemble the practices of the Essenes. They do not resemble the doctrines of the Roman Church, which focused heavily on sacrifice and authority. These forgotten teachings created a rising tension in the story of Jesus. They show a world where his final days carry messages that never appear in the Roman version. This is where the Ethiopian tradition moves into an even more controversial territory, because the final stage of the story does not match the Roman account at all. The shocking counter-narrative, Ethiopia's account of a Jesus who survived the crucifixion. Among all the revelations preserved inside Ethiopia's ancient world, none has created more fear, anger, and controversy than one claim found in a set of old manuscripts. These manuscripts are known by the name Gospel of Peace. They describe a version of events that tears apart the familiar story. They claim Jesus may not have been crucified at all. These writings say that when danger grew inside Jerusalem, Jesus did not walk into the hands of his enemies. Instead, he retreated into the wilderness. He removed himself from the groups hunting him. He continued teaching his followers in secret places. His teachings focused on peace, healing, and the natural world. These writings present a world where Jesus chose survival and silence over confrontation and death. This version of events does not show Jesus as a political victim executed by Roman power. It shows him as a spiritual master who escaped the violence that waited for him. In this telling, people outside these circles did not understand where he went. They saw his disappearance. They created rumors. These rumors spread and hardened into the story of crucifixion that became the version known today. Some Ethiopian theologians argue that Rome accepted the crucifixion narrative because it was useful. A story centered on death and sacrifice gave Rome a form of control. It created a religion that required the authority of institutions. It created a structure where leaders decided how believers approached salvation. A living Jesus teaching spiritual freedom would have destroyed this system. His message would have encouraged independence. Rome needed obedience. Rome needed a story that strengthened its authority. However, the claim about Jesus escaping crucifixion does not sit inside the mainstream Ethiopian canon. It appears instead in monastic writings and oral traditions. These sources describe a Jesus who heals and guides. They show him teaching fasting. They show him teaching purification. They show him teaching harmony with nature. This image stands in sharp contrast to the Western focus on suffering and pain. These writings contain teachings about the angel of air and the angel of water. They speak of a deep unity between humanity and creation. These ideas echo early mystical groups, such as the Essenes. Whether these texts are taken literally or seen as symbolic guidance, they reveal something larger. Ethiopian Christianity never accepted the Roman version of events without questioning it. Ethiopian scholars protected a wide range of teachings. They held on to writings that the rest of the world forgot or rejected. And hidden within this same vault of preserved teachings is something far more disturbing. It is a prophecy that Ethiopian tradition insists was never meant to fall into Roman hands. The final warning. Among all the writings Ethiopia protected through centuries of danger and silence, one set stands apart with a sense of urgency that feels almost threatening. These writings are known as the 40-day teachings. Inside them, Jesus delivers a prophecy about the future of humanity that the Roman Church never accepted. The prophecy does not speak gently. It describes a future where spiritual corruption spreads like a poison. It describes a complete collapse of moral and social order. It describes a world where people believe they are following God, yet their devotion is twisted into service to deception. The prophecy paints a picture of a world trembling under its own confusion. In these teachings, Jesus warns his followers about a terrible time that would fall upon humanity. He says religious leaders will appear holy in public while harming the poor in secret. He says temples will shine with bright perfection while the hearts inside them rot from emptiness. He warns that people will use his name to gain money and power while ignoring every truth he ever taught. He explains that many will preach about him loudly, with pride and confidence, while being spiritually dead inside. He describes entire nations losing their sense of truth and choosing lies because lies feel easier to accept. The most terrifying part of the prophecy speaks of something Jesus calls the silencing of the inner voice. He warns that darkness will rise when people lose the ability to recognize his true teachings, even when they read them with their own eyes. He explains that tradition will take the place of truth. He warns that institutions will twist his message to protect their power. Ethiopian scholars believe this was fulfilled when Rome shaped the Western canon and cut off the wider teachings that Ethiopia preserved. Yet the prophecy does not fall into hopelessness. Jesus promises that in the final age, his true voice will rise again. He says it will not rise from the grand churches. It will not rise from powerful institutions. nations. It will rise from the places the world ignores. It will rise from the deserts. It will rise from the mountains. He says his spirit will awaken inside people who have been pushed aside and forgotten. He promises a fire that will sweep across humanity. This fire will not destroy. It will awaken. It will burn away the deception that has blinded the world. It will reveal the hidden systems that have controlled human thought for generations. Ethiopian monks believed this prophecy was meant for a time when the world would drown in confusion and emptiness. They believed humanity needed to fall very far before it could understand the warning. They guarded the prophecy in secret vaults. They waited through wars, invasions, and centuries of silence because they believed the world was not ready to hear the truth. Today, as faith collapses in many places and corruption spreads without resistance, many Ethiopians believe the prophecy has reached its moment. With the ancient Ethiopian texts resurfacing and the forgotten teachings returning to daylight, the warning carries a weight that feels heavier than ever before. It feels as if the world is finally hearing the message it was never supposed to lose. Thank you for staying with us to the end. See you in the next video.